Hello, everybody. Good to be back again. Thank you. I'm going to speak very briefly about a project that I've been working on for a couple of years. And in fact, it comes out of the last time I was here at the LH Forum 2 years ago. About 6-7 months later, we had a workshop in Cambridge at MIT about social enterprise and whether or not it really makes a difference. And one of the things that we had discovered, and one of the things that we discovered was that social enterprise has social impacts, positive impacts, in very particular circumstances. It doesn't always have the social change consequences that we all hope for. It tends to have very powerful changes in certain areas. And one of those areas is what we call resilience in situations of chronic violence. Dealing with the problems of communities that are beset by violence, whether it's from drug gangs or insurgents or other kinds of violent actors. Communities tend to be vulnerable, so vulnerable that everything about the social organization, the economic organization of a community, of a neighborhood, fairly sizable urban landscape can be disrupted, even destroyed by violence. And so building resilience into these communities is one of the key ways that we can help them from the outside, help them help themselves. So we do think that social enterprise, which has limited impacts in many circumstances, can have very large impacts in localized circumstances where the situation is particularly dire. Now, which circumstances? Well, the circumstances I was just talking about in situations of violent conflict, but also places which are undergoing other traumatic impacts. Climate change, disease vectors, and persistent poverty. The infectious diseases we're seeing now in Africa, the Ebola crisis, a very significant scale. And part of the reason Ebola is having the impact that it is because those communities, those countries, do not have the right kind of resilience to infectious diseases. I think that is a consequence of an infrastructure change that occurred several years ago with structural adjustment policies that robbed those communities of clinics and other means of coping with infectious diseases. So it's a little different from what I'm talking about today, but it's a good illustration of why resilience is so important to build into a society. So what are the elements of resilience? The elements of resilience are particularly the result of communities that act together, that build ties, that build a mission, to work together to resist whatever it is that is besetting them. And I'm speaking mostly now about violent conflict. They often act in concert with the municipalities, but not always. Sometimes, the police, for example, are part of the violence problem. But ultimately, government needs to be part of the solution. So communities have to communicate with their governments. This institutional framework is very important to understanding the success of social enterprise no matter what the circumstances, and it is crucial in circumstances in which there are these outside traumatic effects, whether it's violence or disease, or climate change, or any of the other things. And of course, governments can provide infrastructure support, which is particularly crucial as well. But one thing that we found in a workshop that we did, this workshop that I mentioned before that LH Forum supported in May of 2013, was that commerce is particularly amenable, is particularly suited to helping to build resilience in these situations. How does it do so? Well, there are three questions that I have up here. First of all, how does business activity affect resilience? Secondly, does it matter what kind of business? And third, how does one introduce business into neighborhoods that don't look like good investment opportunities? So here's a hypothesis. Urban resilience requires access to livelihoods, products, and services. The private sector may perceive barriers to entry in these places that prevent them from investing or prevent them from staying. Many businesses flee under these circumstances. Money flees, brain power flees, when violence begins to become threatening. How do we reintroduce it? And municipalities are not particularly good at providing commerce. They're good at infrastructure, they may be good at security, but they're not particularly well adapted to providing new economic activity that's sustainable and fair. Therefore, the social enterprise may be the best bet for these communities that are under siege. This hypothesis is extremely important for several reasons. One is that many cities, I'm speaking mainly about urban resilience, many cities across the world are now beset by violence of one kind or another. And it's not just something that's happening in the developing world. We see it in the United States, we see it in other developed countries as well. International development agencies are pouring lots of money into resilience strategies. They're pouring lots of money into social enterprise, but they haven't really connected the two to see how one will affect the other, what's the optimal combination. So establishing how social enterprise actually contributes to urban resilience, potentially and actually, would be a tremendous contribution to the development agenda worldwide and to building peaceful societies. Because resilience, urban resilience in these neighborhoods can be the best barrier, the best guarantee of stability and peace. So as academics, I'm a PhD, not a PhD-doer, I'm afraid. But as a PhD, I would say there are certain ways we can test this hypothesis. We can do it by metrics, we can do it by going into the communities and doing very detailed ethnographies, thick description as is done in anthropology. But I think we can get at some answers about which kinds of business activities can contribute the most to resilience. And that's something that we're looking into doing right now. Now, social enterprise can have a positive effect, and I'm speculating because we don't have the empirical evidence yet on this, but I think there are some important speculations that are worth considering. First is that larger scale enterprises are more likely to have a measurable impact in these neighborhoods than microenterprise. And that's partly because the larger enterprises can do more things for the neighborhood than microenterprise can. For example, training and other skills development is essential to retaining people in neighborhoods. Education is key to any urban landscape that's under siege. I was just at a conference, participating in a conference at Harvard last weekend about Baghdad. A lot of people from Baghdad came, including former mayor and others and some social entrepreneurs, and they were emphasizing how Baghdad has been robbed of most of its skilled personnel, many of its skilled personnel. Many people have left, and at the same time, there's just a crying need for education and skills development, and they don't know how to start that up. This is an absolutely crucial element of building resilience into a community that is so beset by violence. Large-scale enterprises can also provide social services that may be lacking in the community. Large-scale enterprises can provide things like housing, can contribute to new kinds of housing developments and housing configurations that promote both security and social capital, building relationships, building community spirit. Finally, social enterprise, even if it's in somewhat conflict with the state, it has to negotiate security with the state. This is absolutely essential. You can't consider even going into a community as an entrepreneur or as a financier unless you believe it is relatively secure, that there will be new efforts to create security, a secure environment for investment and economic activity. So, what are the lessons for social entrepreneurs? You want to start a business in the 21st century. You want to do social good. You want to contribute to solving the world's problems and make a profit. Where are the opportunities? Well, I think one of the opportunities is in these urban landscapes all across the world that are beset by violence or by the threat of disease, the threat of climate change, and other dislocations that have a crying need for enterprise. They need retail, they need manufacturing, they need services. And yet private businesses feel that they would be too vulnerable to undertake those kinds of investments. So for entrepreneurs, and particularly for people who are involved in impact investing and financing, because you need the local actors actually to be deeply involved, start the businesses, run the businesses. So it's mostly for people who are coming from the outside to be the sort of generators of capital and investment. These few lessons, I think, are worth keeping in mind as you go forward. Take the opportunity to take the challenge of operating in the most difficult circumstances, mindful of what is at stake, mindful of what the challenges are, mindful of what the vulnerabilities are, but it's also the places where you can do the most good. And thank you for your attention. And now we're going to hear from some real entrepreneurs.
Thank you.